The will named me sole beneficiary, but the lawyers who drafted it were already buried under 6 feet of perfectly manicured Bermuda grass, their silence fertilized by my family's money. I knew the trust's poison pill clause before anyone else did. Grandmother's estate was a Russian nesting doll of contingencies, each layer designed to suffocate the unworthy. The lawyers, 3 of them, all men who'd spent decades interpreting her whims as gospel, had written the final version with a single fatal blind spot. The trust's voting shares could be consolidated through a surviving spouse's rights, even if the spouse was technically deceased, a quirk of maritime law buried in a footnote. I found it while reading the documents in the back of a blacked-out town car, the scent of my grandmother's jasmine perfume still clinging to the leather. She taught me to look for the cracks in things. "The system isn't rigged, darling," she'd said, lighting a cigarette with a $100 bill. "It's just waiting for the right hands to break it open." The lawyers assumed widows were passive creatures. They'd forgotten my grandfather's death was technically unresolved. His plane vanished over the Caribbean, no wreckage, no body. Under maritime inheritance statutes, that meant I could invoke spousal control over his voting shares. All I needed was a judge who wouldn't ask why I'd waited 15 years to file the paperwork. "You're doing it again." Lena stood in the doorway of the study, her fingers smudged with charcoal from her latest portrait. An artist, a chronic empath, the only person who still looked at me like I wasn't a spreadsheet in human form. Doing what? I didn't look up at the documents. "The thing where you forget breathing is mandatory." She tossed a sketch on the desk. A hurried drawing of me, my shoulders rigid, my knuckles white around a pen. "You're going to inherit everything. Why is that not enough?" Because everything wasn't the point. The trust wasn't just money. It was a vault of secrets, and the lawyers had tried to lock me out. The trust's voting shares were only half the battle. The real power lay in the silent equities, assets held offshore under shell companies, invisible to probate. The lawyers had moved them. And then my phone buzzed. A notification from a private tracker I'd installed on the estate's servers. "Access attempt detected. Grand Cayman, IP masked." Someone else knew about the silent equities, and they were already inside. A fiduciary key, embedded in my grandfather's old pocket watch, ticking in reverse. The access attempt in Grand Cayman wasn't just a hack, it was a retrieval. The lawyers had left something behind, something they thought was buried forever. I found the first clue in my grandfather's study, behind a false panel in the mahogany desk Lena and I used to hide in as children. A single sheet of vellum, brittle with age, with coordinates and a string of numbers that made my pulse stutter. The authentication sequence for the silent equities. But the sequence was useless without the physical key. And then I remembered the watch. Grandfather had worn it every day, even on the plane that disappeared. The family lore was that it had gone down with him, but grandmother had kept it. A final joke, a slap in the face to the lawyers who thought they'd outmaneuvered her. I found it in her safe deposit box, still ticking, the second hand moving backward. Lena watched me from the doorway of the bank vault, her arms crossed. "You're not just inheriting money, are you?" I didn't answer. The watch's casing opened with a twist, revealing not gears, but a microchip. The watch was a dead man's switch. The moment I slotted the chip into my laptop, the screen lit up with a cascade of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and, more damningly, a ledger of payments to the 3 lawyers. Not for legal work, for silence. They hadn't just drafted the will, they'd helped hide the bodies. And now, someone was trying to erase the evidence. I'd planned to use the silent equities to force the lawyers into submission, but the ledger changed everything. This wasn't about control anymore. It was about survival. And then the first lawyer died. A car accident, the news said. Too fast, too clean. His Mercedes wrapped around a telephone pole, the fire so hot the coroner needed dental records. The second lawyer called me that night, his voice shaking. We didn't know what she was doing. We just followed instructions. I hung up before he could beg. Lena found the threat before I did. A manila envelope left on her studio doorstep. Inside, photos of her, taken through windows, at galleries, in cafes, and a single note. Tell your sister to stop digging. She threw them onto my desk, her hands trembling. What the hell is this? I kept my voice steady. A warning. From who? From whoever killed the lawyer. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Lena's face twisted. You're dragging me into something. Again. I reached for her, but she stepped back. I'm trying to protect you. By making me a target? She laughed, sharp, brittle. You're just like grandmother. You think money fixes everything. The third lawyer was the smartest of them all. He didn't run. He didn't beg. He went straight to the probate judge and filed an emergency motion to freeze the trust, citing evidence of undue influence. His proof? A signed affidavit from Lena. I stared at the document, the words blurring. She'd testified that I'd coerced her into silence, that I'd threatened her if she didn't comply. The lawyer's smirk was barely concealed. Family is such a fragile thing, isn't it? Lena's betrayal was a lie, but the judge didn't know that. The probate courtroom was a gilded cage. Oak panels absorbed whispers, while the bailiff's polished shoes clicked like a metronome counting down my losses. Harrison Krause, the last surviving lawyer, stood with his back to me, adjusting his cufflinks as if he hadn't just bribed a judge with money from my own trust. Motion to freeze the assets is granted, declared Judge Whitaker. His voice sanded smooth by 30 years of bench work. He didn't glance at the document I'd submitted, proof that the silent equities were being liquidated through a shell company called Mare Nostrum Holdings. I leaned forward. Your Honor, with respect, this isn't just about inheritance. It's about evidence. Whitaker's pen paused. Krause stiffened. I tapped the Swiss banking code printed on my exhibit. Article 23B of the 2024 Fiduciary Revisions allows emergency access to vaults if assets are being destroyed. Those equities are mine, and they're disappearing right now. The judge's eyelids flickered. A tell. He knew about the loophole. Most people think Swiss banking is about secrecy. It's not. It's about plausible deniability. The 2024 revisions forced private vaults to adopt a dual key system. Physical key, the grandfather's watch. Digital key, a one-time code tied to the depositor's biometrics. But the real power was in the emergency clause. If a claimant demonstrates active asset destruction, the vault may be unsealed without full succession proof, provided the claimant assumes liability for any discrepancies. Translation, I could break in, but if I was wrong, I'd owe the bank triple the vault's estimated value. Krause scoffed. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. Whitaker steepled his fingers. 72-hour injunction. If Miss Voss can prove the equities are moving, she keeps access. If not, he didn't need to finish. I smiled. The trap was set. My sister waited in the courthouse lobby, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her ribs together. The surveillance photos, the ones that Krause's men had left on her doorstep, were crumpled in her fist. They came back, she said. No greeting, no hesitation, just raw terror. They said, if you don't drop this by tomorrow, they'll release the photos to the press. Not just of me, but of Mom. The floor tilted. Our mother's accident had been ruled a tragedy. No investigation, no questions. Lena's voice dropped to a whisper. They have a witness. Someone who says it wasn't an accident. I gripped her wrist. Who? She pulled free. It doesn't matter. Don't you get it? They'll ruin her memory. And for what? Money? The moral anchor's weight dragged at me. Lena wasn't just afraid. She was ashamed of me. I filed the withdrawal papers at 3:47 p.m., just before the clerk's office closed. Krause intercepted me in the parking garage. Wise choice. His breath smelled like mint and malice. Some graves shouldn't be reopened. I let him see the defeat in my eyes. Tell your client they win. He didn't know I'd already triggered the loophole's second phase. Any emergency access attempt automatically flags all linked accounts, including the judge's secret Cayman holdings, and Whitaker had just approved mine. Zurich was raining when I arrived. The vault manager, a woman with ice blonde hair and a smile like a scalpel, led me to a private viewing room. Your dual key authentication is confirmed, but there's an anomaly. The ledger inside wasn't grandfather's, it was Whitaker's, and the last entry, dated 2 days ago, was a transfer of $200 million to an account labeled L.N. Voss, Lena's initials. The vault door hissed shut behind me as the manager added, "One more thing. The digital key used to authorize this access wasn't yours." She slid a photograph across the table. It was Lena's fingerprint. The Zurich vault manager's manicured finger tapped the photograph. This biometric override was submitted remotely 12 hours ago. The system recognized it as legitimate. Lena's fingerprint. But that was impossible, unless... The manager continued, oblivious to my racing thoughts. Per Article 23B, any discrepancy voids access. We'll need to freeze these assets pending investigation. I forced a laugh. There's no discrepancy. My sister has joint authority. A lie so smooth it tasted like grandmother's gin. She must have panicked when the court froze everything. The manager's smile didn't reach her eyes. Then you won't mind verifying this. She slid a second document across the table. A transaction log. L.N. Voss. Received $200 million. Source, Whitaker Family Trust. The numbers blurred. Lena had taken the money. I called her from the airport. 3 rings, silence. Then, you weren't supposed to see that. No denial, no excuses, just exhaustion. They offered me a choice, she said. Take the money and disappear or watch them destroy Mom's name. I thought if I played along... You what? The words tore out of me. You let them think you'd betray me? A bitter laugh. No, Elise. I did betray you. Just not the way they wanted. Then she hung up. Back in my hotel room, I pieced it together. Judge Whitaker hadn't just taken bribes, he'd inherited them. The Whitaker Family Trust was a dynastic wealth vehicle, a legal structure designed to bypass probate altogether. But in 2024, a little noticed amendment to the Uniform Trust Code had added a poison pill. Any trust beneficiary who committed fraud forfeited their entire lineage's claim. Whitaker had transferred money to Lena, thinking it would silence her. Instead, he'd tied his corruption directly to his heirs. And Lena had left me a trail. Her studio was empty, except for a single sketch on the easel. A faceless judge holding a scale weighted with bones. Taped to the back, a flash drive and a note. The money's in a charity escrow. They'll release it once the truth comes out. P.S. Mom's witness was Whitaker's son. He was on the boat that day. My hands shook. All these years, Lena had known, and she'd waited until now, until I had the power to burn it all down, to tell me. I sent the files to every financial regulator I knew. Then I walked into Judge Whitaker's chambers unannounced and dropped a single sheet of paper on his desk. I said, "You have 2 choices. Resign quietly or watch your grandchildren lose every penny you ever hid." He paled. "You can't prove." "The escrow is already flagged. The moment I press send, your family's name becomes synonymous with fraud." His voice cracked. "What do you want?" I smiled. "The trust. Unfrozen by noon." As I left, my phone buzzed, an alert from the Cayman tracker. Access granted. L.N. Voss. Lena was already inside.
Midnight in the Caymans. The tracker led me to a private bank where the walls were made of frosted glass and discretion. The account under Ellen Voss wasn't Lena's. It was a charitable remainder trust, a financial ghost ship designed to pay out to a beneficiary, in this case, a shell company called Mary Nostrum, before dispersing the remainder to charity. The perfect vehicle for laundering $200 million. But the money wasn't moving to the shell. It was moving from it.
Lena sat at the terminal, her reflection fractured in the glass walls. She didn't turn when I entered. "You were right," she said. "The money was never the point." On the screen, a live feed of Judge Whitaker's resignation speech, his voice trembling as he cited undue family burdens. Below it, a second window showed the Mare Nostrum ledger, every payment the lawyers had ever hidden, now rerouted to an anonymous tip line for the IRS. She'd turned their own system against them. But the cost was in her eyes. "They killed Mom," Lena said. Whitaker's son was drunk at the helm. The lawyers covered it up. Grandmother knew. Her hands, usually stained with charcoal, were clean, bloodless. "So you set this up? The fake betrayal, the escrow, all of it." A shrug. "I needed you to play your part. You're better at being ruthless." The words should have stung. Instead, they settled like a verdict. The screen flickered, a new alert. "Trigger activated. Mare Nostrum assets frozen by Interpol." Lena exhaled. It's done. But the escrow was still counting down. 10 seconds. 9. At 0, the screen went black, then rebooted with a single line of text. "Fingerprint confirmed. Vault E7J9K open." Lena frowned. "That's not part of the script." I reached for her wrist. "Whose fingerprint did you use to access the Swiss vault?" Her face went pale. The news broke at dawn. Judge Whitaker's son arrested in cold case boating death. Historic settlement paid to Jane Doe survivor. Female millionaire assumes control of contested trust. No heirs challenging. The screen cut to black. Then a security feed from the Zurich vault played showing a woman's hand, my hand, pressing against the scanner. Was the vault her target all along, or did the dead man's switch have one last surprise?